What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actresses walks onto a daytime talk show and faces the most disrespectful interrogation of her career? In just 38 seconds, a single cutting remark from the host turned a pleasant interview into an absolute meltdown that had the entire panel scrambling and left viewers at home with their jaws on the floor. Emma Thompson arrived at the Loose Women's studio that morning, expecting a lighthearted chat about her latest film project. She had done hundreds of interviews before, charmed audiences across the globe, and never once lost her composure on live television. But what unfolded that day was unlike anything anyone had seen on daytime TV. The panel was in full swing. Denise Welch sat in the center chair, flanked by Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore. The studio lights were hot. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, and Emma walked out to thunderous applause, wearing an elegant navy blue dress and her signature warm smile. "Welcome, welcome, Emma Thompson, everyone," Denise announced, gesturing to the empty seat. "Come sit down. Lovely to have you here." Emma settled into her chair, crossing her legs and placing her hands neatly in her lap. "Thank you so much for having me. It is always wonderful to be here." The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Kay asked about the new film, and Emma spoke eloquently about the challenges of playing a character dealing with grief. Nadia chimed in with compliments about Emma's previous work. Jane asked about the filming locations. Everything felt safe, familiar, professional. Then Denise leaned forward with that look, the one where her eyes narrow slightly, and her mouth curves into something that is not quite a smile. Anyone who watches the show regularly knows that look. It means she is about to say something provocative. "So Emma, I have to ask," Denise began, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "You have been very vocal lately about various causes, very political, very outspoken. Some might say exhaustingly so. Do you ever worry that you are alienating half your audience with all these opinions?" The studio went quiet. You could feel the temperature drop. Emma blinked, her smile faltering just slightly. I think it is important to use whatever platform one has to speak about things that matter," Emma replied carefully, maintaining her composure. "If that means some people disagree, then so be it. I would rather stand for something than nothing at all." Kay jumped in quickly, clearly trying to smooth things over. "And we admire that about you, Emma. Your passion is infectious." But Denise was not finished. She waved Kay off dismissively and pressed on. "But do not you think there is something a bit, I do not know, preachy about it all? I mean, you are an actress. You are not a politician. You are not an expert on these things. Why should anyone care what Emma Thompson thinks about climate change, or inequality, or whatever the cause of the week is?" The audience gasped. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma sat up straighter, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. "Well, Denise, I could ask you the same question," Emma said, her voice still controlled, but with steel underneath. "You sit here every day sharing your opinions on everything under the sun. What makes your voice more valid than mine?" Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think what Emma is trying to say—" "I know what she is trying to say," Denise interrupted, not even looking at Nadia. Her eyes stayed locked on Emma. "But the difference is, this is my job. This show is literally about us sharing our opinions. You, on the other hand, are here to promote a film. Maybe stick to that?" The condescension in her tone was unmistakable. Emma's face remained composed, but her knuckles were white as her hands gripped the armrests. "With respect, Denise, I was not aware there was a rule that said actresses must stay silent on matters of importance. Perhaps you could point me to that particular regulation?" A few audience members laughed nervously. Jane Moore looked down at her notes, clearly wanting no part of this. Kay tried again. "Ladies, perhaps we can—" "No, Kay, let her finish," Denise said, that fake smile plastered on her face. "I want to hear this. Go on, Emma. Tell us all how you, from your privileged position, your lovely homes, your comfortable life. Tell us how you understand the struggles of ordinary people. Please, enlighten us. The mask was fully off now. This was not journalism. This was not even debate. This was a personal attack dressed up as an interview question. Emma took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. You know, Denise, I came here today in good faith. I came here to talk about a film that I care deeply about, made by talented people who poured their hearts into it. I did not come here to be patronized or mocked for caring about things. Nobody is mocking you, Denise shot back, but her tone said otherwise. I am simply asking if you think your celebrity gives you more of a right to speak than regular people. That's a fair question, is it not, ladies? She looked to the other panelists for support. Nadia looked absolutely mortified. Jane was studying her hands. Kay finally spoke up. I think that is not quite fair, Denise. Emma has every right to... Oh, here we go, Denise laughed, but it was harsh, brittle. Everyone jumping to defend perfect Emma Thompson. Surprise, surprise. Emma stood up. Not dramatically, not with a flourish. She simply rose from her chair with quiet dignity, smoothing down her dress. Denise, I have sat through some uncomfortable interviews in my time, but this is something else entirely. You invited me here, presumably to have a conversation, but what you actually wanted was to belittle me on national television. I will not sit here and be your punching bag for whatever issue you are working through today. The studio was dead silent. Every camera was fixed on Emma. Denise's face had gone red. Oh, do not be so dramatic, Emma. We are just having a discussion. Can you not handle a few tough questions? Tough questions? Emma repeated, her eyebrows raised. Is that what you call this? Because from where I am standing, it feels an awful lot like bullying. Nadia audibly gasped. Jane's eyes went wide. Kay looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. Denise stood up now too, her voice rising. Bullying? How dare you? I am the host of this show. I ask the questions I want to ask. If you cannot handle that, then maybe you should not come on talk shows. Perhaps you are right, Emma said calmly, already unclipping her microphone. Perhaps I should not come on this show. In fact, I can guarantee you that I will not be coming back. Fine by me, Denise snapped. We have plenty of guests who can take a bit of heat without running away like a child. That was the moment. That was the line that pushed it too far. Emma stopped, turned back to face Denise directly, and spoke with the kind of controlled fury that only comes from years of classical training. You know what your problem is, Denise. You have confused cruelty with honesty. You think that being rude makes you authentic, that tearing people down makes you interesting. But all it does is make you small. And I truly pity anyone who has to sit across from you and endure this treatment in the name of entertainment. The audience erupted. Some were applauding. Others were gasping. A few were shouting. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. Denise's face went from red to purple. Get off my stage. Go on. Get out. I am already leaving, Emma replied, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. But before I go, let me say this to anyone watching at home. You deserve to be treated with respect. Your opinions matter. Your voice matters. And you should never let anyone make you feel small for caring about things. Not even someone with a microphone and a television show. She looked at the other panelists. Kay, Nadia, Jane, it was lovely to see you all. I am sorry this is how this ended. All three women looked utterly shell-shocked. Nadia had tears in her eyes. Kay managed a weak nod. Jane just stared. Denise was not finished, though. As Emma turned to walk off the set, she called after her. This is what happens when people surround you with yes men for too long. You forget how to handle reality. You forget that not everyone thinks you are perfect. Emma paused at the edge of the stage, one hand on the curtain. For a moment, it looked like she might turn back, might have one final word, but instead, she simply shook her head and walked through the curtain, disappearing from view. The second she was gone, the studio descended into chaos. Audience members were shouting at each other. Half of them were on Denise's side, saying Emma was being too sensitive. The other half were appalled at how Denise had treated a guest. Kay was trying to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, if we could just..." But Denise was not backing down. She stood there, arms crossed, face still flushed with anger. "Well," she said, addressing the cameras directly, "I suppose we have all just witnessed what happens when you dare to challenge someone who is used to everyone kissing their feet. Emma Thompson, everyone. Such grace under pressure." The sarcasm was dripping from every word. Nadia could not stay quiet anymore. "Denise, that was completely out of order. You attacked her from the moment she sat down." "I did not attack anyone," Denise fired back. "I asked legitimate questions. If she could not handle them, that is on her, not me." "You called her preachy," Jane said quietly, finding her voice at last. "You questioned her right to have opinions. You mocked her for caring about things. How is that legitimate questioning?" Denise whirled on Jane. "Since when are you the moral authority here? You sit there silent the whole time, and now you want to weigh in?" The tension between the panelists was now as explosive as the tension had been with Emma moments before. This was imploding in real time. Kay, ever the professional, tried desperately to regain control. "I think we need to take a break. We need to just pause for a moment and..." "We are not taking a break," Denise declared. "We are live. This is what live television looks like. It is messy. It is real. And I will not apologize for that." Nadia stood up now, pulling off her own microphone. "If that is what you think real television looks like, then I want no part of it. That was cruel, Denise. That was mean. And you know it." Now it was Denise's turn to look shocked. "Nadia, sit down. Do not be ridiculous." "I am not being ridiculous. I am standing up for basic human decency. Emma Thompson came here as a guest. She deserved respect. And you treated her like garbage." The audience was in an uproar now. The producers were definitely screaming into everyone's earpieces. This had gone from a difficult interview to a full-scale disaster. Kay was frantically trying to wrap things up. "We are going to take a very quick break. Please stay with us. We will be right back." But as the camera pulled back, you could see Denise and Nadia still arguing. You could see Jane looking utterly dismayed. You could see Kay's fake smile barely holding together. What had started as a simple interview about a film had turned into one of the most explosive moments in Loose Women history. And at the center of it all was Emma Thompson, who had walked onto that stage with grace and walked off with even more. Because here is what Denise failed to understand in her rush to create drama, in her need to be provocative, in her desire to take someone down a peg. When you attack someone like Emma Thompson, someone with decades of respect and admiration, someone known for their kindness and intelligence and humanity, you do not make them look bad. You make yourself look petty. Emma did not need to shout. She did not need to curse. She did not need to throw anything or storm off in a tantrum. All she had to do was stand up, speak her truth with quiet dignity, and walk away. And in doing so, she showed everyone watching exactly what class looks like. Meanwhile, Denise was left standing on that stage, still arguing with her co-hosts, still insisting she had done nothing wrong, still trying to justify the unjustifiable. The contrast could not have been more stark. As the show cut to commercial, audience members were already pulling out their phones. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were spreading across social media. Within an hour, it was trending. Within a day, it would be international news. But none of that mattered in that moment. In that moment, all that mattered was what had just unfolded on live television. A masterclass in how to handle a hostile interviewer. a demonstration of grace under pressure, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to engage with someone who is determined to drag you down to their level. Emma Thompson had come to talk about art, about storytelling, about the craft she loved. Instead, she ended up teaching a different kind of lesson entirely. She taught everyone watching that you do not have to accept mistreatment, that you can stand up for yourself without losing your composure, that you can call out bad behavior without stooping to it yourself. And perhaps most importantly, she reminded us all that there is a difference between being provocative and being cruel, between asking challenging questions and launching personal attacks, between creating compelling television and creating a hostile environment. Denise Welch had wanted drama. She had wanted fireworks. She had wanted a moment that people would talk about. Well, she got it. Just not in the way she had hoped. Because this was not a moment that made her look brave or bold or unafraid to ask tough questions. This was a moment that made her look like a bully, like someone who had let whatever personal feelings she had about Emma Thompson cloud her professional judgment. Like someone who had forgotten the basic principle that guests on a show should be treated with a baseline level of respect. The other panelists knew it. You could see it on their faces. Nadia, standing up and removing her microphone, refusing to be complicit. Jane, speaking up despite her earlier silence, pointing out exactly what had gone wrong. Even Kay, usually the peacekeeper, looking deeply uncomfortable with how things had unfolded. They all knew that this was not okay, that this was not normal, that this crossed a line. But Denise was still standing there, defiant, defensive, determined not to back down. Because backing down would mean admitting fault. It would mean acknowledging that she had gone too far. And clearly, she was not ready to do that. So there they stood, frozen in that moment of chaos. The show that was supposed to be about women supporting women, about creating a space for honest conversation, about celebrating female voices, had instead become a cautionary tale about what happens when ego and agenda override empathy and professionalism. Emma Thompson was gone, but her presence still hung over that studio like a ghost. Every empty seat was a reminder of how badly this had gone. Every awkward silence between the panelists was a testament to the damage that had been done. And in the end, that was perhaps the most damning thing of all. Denise had set out to take Emma Thompson down, to challenge her, to put her in her place. But all she had actually done was reveal her own insecurities, her own need to dominate, her own inability to engage with someone she perceived as a threat without resorting to personal attacks. Emma had not needed to fight back with the same weapons. She had not needed to insult Denise, or question her credentials, or mock her life choices. She had simply stated facts, set boundaries, and left. And in doing so, she had won without ever entering the battle. That is the power of true confidence. That is the strength that comes from knowing your own worth. That is what grace under pressure actually looks like. As the commercial break continued and the panelists sat in awkward silence, waiting for the cameras to turn back on, you had to wonder what was going through their minds. Was Denise feeling vindicated, still convinced she was in the right? Were the others rehearsing what they would say when they came back from break? Was anyone thinking about reaching out to Emma to apologize? The cameras would turn back on in moments. The show would continue. They would try to move forward, to get through the rest of the hour, to pretend that everything was fine. But everyone watching knew the truth. This was not fine. This would never be fine. This was the moment that would define that episode, that day, possibly that entire season. This was the moment people would remember long after they forgot what film Emma was supposed to be promoting. And it all came down to those 38 seconds. From the moment Denise asked that first cutting question to the moment Emma decided she had heard enough. 38 seconds that changed everything. 38 seconds that showed the difference between someone who uses their platform to elevate and someone who uses it to attack. Emma Thompson had walked onto that stage as a celebrated actress coming to promote her work. She walked off that stage as something more, a symbol of dignity, a reminder of strength, an example of how to handle yourself when someone is determined to make you look small. She did not yell. She did not cry. She did not lash out. She simply stood up and left. And sometimes that is the most powerful statement of all. Because in leaving, in refusing to participate in that toxic dynamic, in drawing a line and sticking to it, Emma showed everyone watching that you do not have to accept unacceptable behavior, that you do not owe anyone your presence if they cannot treat you with basic respect, that walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. The studio was still in chaos. The panelists were still reeling. The audience was still buzzing. And somewhere beyond those curtains, Emma Thompson was probably taking a deep breath, processing what had just happened, maybe even wondering if she should have handled it differently. But here's the thing. She did not need to handle it differently. She handled it perfectly. She gave Denise multiple chances to course correct. She tried to redirect to the actual purpose of the interview. She defended herself without being defensive. And when it became clear that Denise was more interested in confrontation than conversation, Emma made the only choice that made sense. She left. That takes courage. It takes self-respect. It takes a deep understanding of your own boundaries and a willingness to enforce them, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is public, even when it would be easier to just sit there and take it. Emma Thompson did not take it. And that is why, even though she was the one who left, even though she was the one who walked away, she was the clear victor in this exchange. Not because she destroyed Denise with some perfect comeback or devastating insult, but because she refused to play the game at all. She showed that you do not have to engage with someone who is determined to misunderstand you. You do not have to defend yourself to someone who has already decided you are guilty. You do not have to waste your time and energy on someone who is not interested in actual dialogue. Denise wanted a fight. Emma refused to give her one. And in that refusal, in that simple act of standing up and walking away, Emma won more decisively than any argument ever could have achieved. The lights in the studio seemed brighter somehow after Emma left. The air seemed thinner. The whole atmosphere had shifted. What had been tense and hostile was now just sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that a simple promotional interview had devolved into something so ugly. Sad that professional pride had gotten in the way of basic human decency. As the producers counted down the seconds until they were back on air, you could see the panic in everyone's eyes. How do you recover from something like this? How do you move forward when your show has just publicly imploded? How do you explain to viewers what they just witnessed? The answer was simple. You could not. All you could do was acknowledge it, own it, and hope that people understood. But that would require humility. It would require admitting fault. And based on Denise's continued defiance, that did not seem likely to happen anytime soon. So the show would come back from commercial. They would awkwardly try to transition to the next segment. They would pretend that everything was normal, that this was just another day on Loose Women. But no one would be fooled. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had heard those words. Everyone had watched Emma Thompson choose dignity over drama. And everyone had seen what happens when a host confuses antagonism with journalism. This was more than just a bad interview. This was a lesson, a reminder, a wake-up call about how we treat people, about how we use our platforms, about the difference between challenging someone and attacking them, about the responsibility that comes with having a microphone and an audience. Emma Thompson understood that responsibility. She had spent her entire career using her voice thoughtfully, carefully, purposefully. She spoke about things that mattered. She championed causes she believed in. She used her platform to try to make the world a little bit better. And for that, she was called preachy, exhausting, privileged, out of touch. But here's the truth that Denise either did not see or chose to ignore. Emma Thompson's privilege, her platform, her position, all of that could have been used for pure self-interest. She could have just promoted her projects and gone home. She could have stayed silent on difficult issues. She could have played it safe, but she did not. She chose to stand for something. She chose to speak up. She chose to use her voice for more than just personal gain. And that made some people uncomfortable. That made some people defensive. That made Denise want to take her down. Because when someone is genuinely trying to make a positive difference, it can feel like an indictment of those who are not. When someone speaks up, it can make others feel like they are being accused of staying silent. When someone cares deeply, it can make others feel like they are being judged for not caring enough. But that was not Emma's intention. She was not trying to make anyone feel bad. She was not trying to position herself as better than others. She was simply being herself, speaking her truth, living her values. And if that made others uncomfortable, well, that said more about them than it did about her. Denise's discomfort, her need to attack, her determination to cut Emma down, it all came from a place of insecurity, of fear that maybe, just maybe, Emma was right. That maybe speaking up does matter. That maybe using your platform for good is important. That maybe silence in the face of injustice is not neutral. And rather than sit with that discomfort, rather than examine those feelings, Denise lashed out. She attacked. She mocked. She tried to make Emma the problem instead of looking at her own reaction. That is what makes this whole situation so telling. It was never really about Emma's politics, or her activism, or her opinions. It was about Denise's ego. It was about power. It was about control. It was about a host who could not handle a guest who refused to be diminished. Emma Thompson came to that studio as an equal, as a professional, as someone worthy of respect, and Denise could not accept that. She needed to be above Emma, to have power over her, to put her in her place. And when Emma would not accept that dynamic, when she pushed back, when she stood up for herself, Denise escalated. That is the pattern of a bully. That is the behavior of someone who confuses authority with superiority. That is what happens when someone values being right over being kind. And Emma saw it clearly. She named it. She called it what it was, and then she removed herself from it. Not out of weakness, not because she could not handle the heat, but because she recognized a no-win situation and chose not to participate in it. The show was coming back from commercial now. The cameras were hot again. Denise had composed herself somewhat, though her eyes were still flashing with residual anger. The other panelists looked exhausted. They would try to move on. They would introduce the next segment. They would talk about something lighter, something easier. They would do their jobs. But the ghost of what had just happened would hang over the rest of the show. Every smile would be forced. Every laugh would be hollow. Every attempt at normalcy would be transparent. Because you cannot just move on from something like that. You cannot unsay those words. You cannot undo that damage. You cannot pretend it did not happen. All you can do is face the consequences. And those consequences were already starting to unfold, even as the cameras rolled. But that is a different story. That is what came after. Right now, in this moment, the story was simple. Emma Thompson walked onto a talk show expecting respect and professionalism. She was met with hostility and condescension. She gave Denise every chance to correct course. Denise doubled down, so Emma left. She left with her head held high. She left with her dignity intact. She left with the respect of everyone watching who recognized what had just happened. She left having taught everyone a valuable lesson about boundaries, self-respect, and the courage it takes to walk away from toxicity. And Denise was left standing on that stage, still insisting she was right, still defending the indefensible, still trying to convince herself and everyone else that she had done nothing wrong. But the empty chair across from her told a different story. The uncomfortable faces of her co-hosts told a different story. The stunned silence of the audience told a different story. Sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is not to fight back. It is to simply refuse to participate, to stand up, to speak your truth, and to walk away. That is what Emma Thompson did, and that is why, even though she was the one who left, she was the one who truly won.